Okay.
Console loud and clear. Good to see you again.
You too. How you doing?
Doing well. Happy New Year. Happy New
You
Year.
hear you as well.
Yeah. So we're going to do this again because your book's coming out tomorrow. I love it. Um, so I'm just going to do a quick intro so everybody that's watching live, they know who you are. So I'm going to give a little bit of background of who you are. But for those who are watching live, welcome to the Military Wire. I'm Mike Schindler, the host of the Military Wire, where we interview some of America's top military experts, best-selling authors, people who have served this country in uniform, to kind of tap their expertise and knowledge, skill sets in hopes that you, the listener, can learn something from this. And in this case, with Brad Taylor, best-selling author Brad Taylor, who's got the Pike Logan series, sold over 3 million copies, former special operator, an amazing story. If you haven't seen past interviews with Brad, you need to check those out. And today we're going to be talking about Brad's book, which is coming out tomorrow. His latest, Brad Taylor, Dead Man's Hand. Um, Brad, first of all, welcome to the show. Secondly, I really wanted to name this the conflict between Ukraine and Russia is what I really wanted to name it. But welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah. So let's dive into it. So I just got this and started reading it over the weekend. And Dead Man's Hand, we'll get into the title of that. I am three-quarters of the way through it. Uh, I I will just let the authors know that between Sweden and Finland, I recognize some of those locations because I've actually visited those locations. And I was going through the museum. There's a scene in there about the museum. Anyway, brilliant. So I want to jump into this. First of all, tell the listeners kind of the overview of Dead Man's Hand. What is this all about?
Yeah, well, I guess in the grand strategic thing, it's more about the moral dilemma of counter leadership targeting than it is about anything else.
Mm,
Operationally is where the book actually goes into it, but the grand overview is that a group of partisans from Ukraine want to eliminate Putin as the only way to end the Ukraine war. It's in a stalemate. The only way we're going to get this guy out of our country is to get rid of him. Unbeknownst to them, he has an end game. There's a second and third order effect of getting rid of him that involves him launching nuclear missiles.
Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit because as I read through this book, um, and you can either choose to answer this or not answer this, but are you a fan of Putin? Are you not a fan? Do you take yourself
No.
out of the readership? I mean, how do you do these books?
Well, in this case, I actually just started studying the Ukraine war, not because I was going to write a book about it. I actually had no intention of writing about Ukraine war because it's current.
Yeah,
And the problem with current things are they're current. And anything
yeah.
could have happened in the Ukraine war in the time because it takes a while to get the book out. It takes a year to write it and then another year for it to go through all the machinations and publication and all that. And things can happen that would ruin the book. But as I was doing research on Ukraine and Russia and what's going on there, I ran into the perimeter system, which I'd never heard of,
Hmm.
which is basically came from the 80s when Reagan created the SDI Strategic Defense Initiative, which the Star Wars
Yep.
initiative, which he was claiming that America would be able to knock out any missile that enters our atmosphere. You wouldn't be able to do a first strike on us because we can get rid of the missiles. Well, at the time, we had mutually assured destruction, the MAD doctrine. So, which basically said, Russia, if you attack the United States, they're going to attack you, and you're both going to die. Well, Russia got scared about this, even though it never came to fruition. We never came close to being able to knock out a single missile, much less a first strike.
Interesting.
Russia said, well, if these guys can knock out every missile, it encourages the United States to do a first strike because there is no more any MAD. They can strike Russia, and even if Russia retaliates, it doesn't matter because they can knock out every missile. So Russia couldn't do SDI, and so they came up with the perimeter system, which is really the first part of artificial intelligence. They built this network around the world, around their country, that would have seismic sensors to see if there's seismic activities, monitor the communications to see if the criminal communications have been cut out. Had all these things that came together, and if all the conditions were met, then the computer said there was a first strike, and everybody's gone. In which case, the missiles would launch on their own. It was called a perimeter system by the USSR. We called it the dead hand, and that thing still exists in Russia. And when I read that, I was like, man, that's enough for a story. So in the book, I altered it to be not the way it gets initiated right now is if there's literally a first strike on Russia, nuclear strike. And in the book, Putin changes it to mean me personally, if something happens to me, these missiles are going, and he's doing it as a protection against himself. You guys, because there's rumblings of coups, that kind of stuff. You
Yeah.
guys might want to get rid of me, but if you do, you're getting rid of Russia. And so that's kind of the plot of the book.
Interesting. So Logan, Pike Logan, he's kind of the chief character in your story. Story involves Putin's henchmen. So walk me through, how did your experience as a former special operator, special forces officer influence the portrayal of the intense geopolitical events? I mean, you've got this background, you visit these countries, your
Yeah.
experience, how does that apply here?
Well, I'd say I just use my experiences from, I mean, I've worked all over the world and I've been in some of these meetings, and there's nothing in the book that per se, I did this in Afghanistan or I did this in Georgia or
Yeah.
wherever I did an operation. I don't just change that and put it in the book, but you can't help but think about your own experiences. I've been in the room, albeit guy in the cheap seats in the room. I wasn't making decisions, but I've heard decisions being made, sausage being done, operational planning, all the way down to tactical, the gunfight level of what goes on. You can't help but fall back on those experiences when you're writing a book.
So are you pulling headlines? I mean, I've got so many questions. I mean, I'm thinking about even Israel's, what do they call that? The dome, right? They've got the dome that
Iron
does take
Dome.
down every missile. And you're saying we don't have that in the US. Russia
Well,
doesn't have
Israel
it.
actually doesn't have it either. The Iron Dome's not made for ballistic missiles. They have another system called the Archer that's made for ballistic missiles, which has just now come online. But the
Interesting.
Iron Dome is made for short range missiles, things like that. They're not made for hypersonic ballistic nuclear missiles.
Interesting. So we're all just kind of in this mutually destructive, like you hit me, I hit you, and it's not going to be good either way.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So you've got your book introduces a dramatic scenario of the global threat um, with a nuclear response. What message do you really hope that the readers take from this? Is there a greater message in the book? Like, hey, we just
I don't. I mean, the main thing I'd like them to know is just to have a good read. I want them to. If I
okay.
get an email that says, I didn't get any sleep last night, thanks a lot, then I'm perfectly pleased. So I don't. There's no overarching message other than that uh, geopolitics is messy. It's not clean cut. It's you too often you have these bumper sticker answers you see on the news. For instance,
Yeah.
we're getting rocketed in Iraq right now from Iranian-backed militias. Well, we
Hmm.
should just blow them all up. I mean, there's a binary choice. We're just cowards because we won't blow them up. There's a lot more that goes into that. We're inside a foreign country, a sovereign country that's invited us to be there. And I always, when people ask me these questions, I always say, well, just reverse it to the United States. Say, just say that we had a bunch of Iraqis at a base here, and there's a bunch of people in America didn't like them and launched a rocket at them, and then they blew up a city inside the United States. How would that go over? So, I
Yeah.
mean, we're not the 800-pound gorilla and just run around. We're there. And what the reason they're launching those rockets is they want us to leave Iraq. If we leave Iraq, then Iraq falls into the sway of Iran. Iran now has a land bridge into Syria. From Syria, they can outfit Hezbollah in Lebanon. Right now, we're the thing stopping them. So they say we need to get rid of the Americans. How do we get rid of Americans? We'll launch rockets at them. If they launch rockets back, it's two things are going to happen. One, the Iraqis are going to say, get out of my country. Or two, the American population is going to say, let's leave that country. They win either way. So it's not just a simple question of, let's get our big tomahawks on and go chopping scalps.
So second and third order effects are really instrumental in any decision making, especially with these geopolitical events. How do is there a way that we really educate the population on it? Is it even really important to even educate the population on it?
No, I absolutely think it's important to educate the population because I mean, one of the few nations on earth where the civilian control of the military is sacrosanct, and the
Yeah.
civilian control of our government is through the population. So I definitely think we should educate them on it because it's not happening right now. You just got a bunch of bumper stickers running around. Second and third order effects are actually pretty when you're talking counter leadership targeting. And whether it's sub state group like Hezbollah or a state group like Putin, there's always second and third order effects. And
Yeah.
we do those strategies for two specific reasons. And by that, I mean, if you had actually ulterior goals and you're not just John Hinckley out there because you love Jodie Foster, but you have an actual goal, you're going to do it either for dislocation, which means you're trying, this guy that you're getting rid of has some kind of unique martial skill And if I get rid of him, that'll help me win the conflict, whatever that conflict is. Soleimani is a good example of dislocation. We took out the head of the Quds force 3 years ago this month in Baghdad. He was the Iranian Quds force.
Mm.
He was pretty much a genius. We got rid of him, so we hope that helps. The other reason you'll do it is for replacement, in which case you're trying to get rid of this guy because you know the guy that's going to take his place is more amenable to your views.
Yeah.
So if you think about Hitler in World War II, the German high command was trying to get rid of Hitler because they wanted to get peace. And if they'd gotten rid of Hitler, then somebody would have sued for peace. That's kind of a replacement strategy. The problem with both of those is there's always second and third order effects. So, for instance, Nasrallah is running Hezbollah right now in Lebanon. It's a pretty good commander of Hezbollah. In 1992, Israel killed the commander of Hezbollah and assassinated him, did a counter leadership strike on him. And Nasrallah took over. So the first second order effect you got to look at is who's taken over. Nasrallah turned out to be a heck of a lot better than the guy they killed. He's got more rockets. He's got 40% of the parliament of Lebanon. He's got all kinds of stuff. Hezbollah has become a force because they assassinated the first guy and Nasrallah took over. So there's always second and third order effects you've got to take into account. And the book itself, Dead Man's Hand, is kind of takes that to the ultimate degree. We look at it, we're going to get rid of this guy, and that'll be the end of it. Now there's a second order effect. If you get rid of him, he's going to launch a bunch of nuclear missiles. And you've got to take all that into account. I mean, for instance, we did Libya during the Arab Spring, and it's like, we're going to get rid of Gaddafi. We're going to get rid of Gaddafi. And that's going to be just a wonderful thing. Well, now Libya is a terrorist haven. It's a mecca for terrorism. It's a complete mess. And we didn't think about that. We're like, this thing ends when we get rid of Gaddafi. No, it actually just started when you got rid of Gaddafi.
Well, so who has the final sign off on this? I mean, you've got, certainly in the military, we train a bit on second and third order effects. Our politicians, obviously, maybe they need more schooling in this area, but they're being advised by military counsel. Do we just miss that? Do we not? Is it really?
I'll tell you,
we just don't know what we don't know. I mean,
I'll tell you that when I saw that, I followed the Libya thing all the way when it was going on, just to use as a case study. And Robert Gates was Secretary of Defense at the time, and he was saying, no, 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 we should not be doing this. No, no, no. The Obama administration said, yes, yes, yes. Although they said on the surface, we're not trying to get rid of Gaddafi. That's not the end state.
Yeah.
Well, when you do a no-fly zone and the rebels are running amok, and the only thing that's stopping them is Gaddafi's air power, he's going. I mean, that's what happened. Sure enough, the rebels caught him and killed him, and beat him up right there in the street, got video of him getting beat up. And, then Hillary Clinton gets as Secretary of State, says, we came, we saw, he died. Yay. And then we left Libya, and it's a complete mess.
Yeah. Interesting. So for those viewers that don't know who Hinckley and Jodie Foster are, Jodie Foster, actress, Hinckley, he attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan back in the day. I totally remember that so well. So how do you approach this character development? I mean, this is such a high action, high output book. Brad, I got to say that I love this. I mean, I feel like I'm reading the headlines right now, honestly, which makes me think, okay, how are they not consulting with you? That's number one. Number two, but how do you do the character development? Is this just an amalgamation of people that you've served with over time?
Well, it is with when you're talking about the people in the task force themselves. Obviously I pick and choose and develop the characterizations there. But when you're talking about the antagonist, Putin's kind of a known quantity. I've read a lot about him. I can't psychoanalyze him, and you can only read open source for what I know. But on the the Wolverines, the wolves on the partisans in Ukraine side, everybody's got a motivation to do stuff. I've never seen a Dr. Evil. I've sat across from a lot of terrorists, and there's never been a Dr. Evil. Well, I'm doing this just because I like killing people, and I'm going to blow up babies because that's what I want to do. They think they're the good guy. They think they're doing the good thing. There's a reason why they're doing this. And I try to capture that motivation on the page and show that, it's not somebody who woke up one day and just said, what am I going to do today? I think I'm going to drive a truck in Nice, France through a parade and slaughter a bunch of people while screaming Allah Akbar. Yeah. That guy he turned into a terrorist, and he believes he's doing the good thing. And I try to capture that on the page, that there's motivations there that, it's not, we look at it and just go, that is insane. What is he thinking? Even in our own country, we see that is insane. What is he thinking? Dylan Roof here in my hometown went into a black church and killed 9 people with a handgun. Yeah. He was trying to start a race war. He thought he was doing a good thing. To
Yeah.
him, he's the righteous one. He's not, just he didn't wake up and say, I want to kill 10 people, doesn't matter who they are. He woke up and said, I need to start a race war. How can I do that? And then he went to the oldest black church in Charleston and killed a bunch of churchgoers. But in
Mm.
his mind, he was the good guy.
Yeah. So what define, I mean, obviously that's a clear-cut case right there of who's bad, who's not. Any thoughts of doing any, I mean, will Pike ever operate here in the United States and maybe tackle some subject like January 6th, which seems to be a big debate among the nation? I mean,
He wants he will never touch January 6th with a 10-foot pole. I,
yeah,
I don't do politics at all. I can't stand reading books from somebody, whether it's left or right. If
yeah,
I'm reading a book and they start preaching their political viewpoints to me, I just quit reading. But
yeah,
the task force has operated on U.S. soil. In my second book called Necessary Force, there was a group of people in the United States that were doing bad things, and they did take them on.
yeah. So one of the things that I thought was so interesting, I mean, many things in this book, but certainly the tracking via cell phone, smartphones, and
Yeah,
how yeah, I think you call them the antagonists are using an old flip phone because it has,
yeah.
no ability to be traced. Um, is that true? Number one. So, well,
Oh
I'll
yeah,
just, yeah, keep it
yeah,
there. Is that true?
yeah.
So,
Any smartphone that you have now that's got GPS built into it, you can easily geolocate any cell phone. They're pretty simple to do. In fact, there's so many different ways to do it. It gets harder and harder to pick, which way I'm going to track this. I mean, there's obviously classified ways we do it, which I'm obviously not going to talk about, but
yep,
there's plenty of unclassified ways to do it. For instance, I'm talking to you over via Zoom, which is going through the internet, which has an IP address, which is connected to the Mac on my computer. I
yep,
can look up that IP address and the Mac on this computer and geolocate this computer right now, open source to my house. So if you're using your phone on the Wi-Fi in Starbucks, they can find that phone in Starbucks through the Wi-Fi you're using. Now that's not granular to 3 or 4 meters. They can find the ISP for Starbucks. So I know you're in Starbucks. Well, if it's 3-story Starbucks, then I gotta have to figure out where you are in there, but I know
yep.
you're using that Wi-Fi.
Interesting. Wow. It almost makes me want to go back to simpler times. I mean, if there's one thing that
Yeah.
I learn about your books, as I read through them, I'm like, I'm making mental notes of things like, hey, maybe I should just go back to a flip phone. But then I do so many interviews, right? That to your
Well,
point,
even
you
the
find me at my house. So
even the flip phones, you can still, if you, it's old fashioned. It's like in the old days when we would triangulate a radio signal in World War II, even or
yeah,
Vietnam, you'd say the signal's coming from this direction. Well, then you move over here and it comes from this direction. You move behind it, it comes from this direction. Well, where those intersect is where that radio is. So with your flip phone, you're still talking to antennas as you're talking.
yeah,
And you can
yeah,
say it went from that antenna to this antenna to that antenna. And somewhere in there, now the circle arrow probable is not going to be 4 meters. It might be 400 meters, but I can still figure out where you are.
yeah. Wow, that's just nuts. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about this line between reality and fiction because this book seems really close. Like it's walking the line.
Yeah.
Have any of your novels, like all of a sudden you're like, shoot, I wrote about this and it actually kind of came true. Has that ever, I don't want to say scared you because I think you've got a moxie about you where you're like, hey, there might be some apprehension, but as far as being scared, but has there been like, man, maybe I've got this predictive quality? Does that make sense?
No, I
No.
wish I did. Because sometimes it sounds like, wow, Brad predicted the future. But the truth of the
Yeah.
matter is, I just stay up on events worldwide. And
Yeah.
those events don't make the American news just because there's only so much,
Yeah.
cycle in the news day. And, we've got to talk about Iowa 24/7. We can't talk about anything that happened in Cameroon.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and for instance, I was doing 2 books a year, and that was just grueling. So the way the publishing industry works, 6 months out, they'll send out their catalog, whatever the publisher is, to bookstores, Barnes and Noble, libraries, those kind of things, and they'll say what books they want when they come out. And if you're not in that catalog, then nobody's going to buy your book because the bookstore didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
Well, they do that 6 months out. It takes a year to write a book. It's easy to get that done. Halfway through writing the book, you send it to them. Well, if you're doing 2 books a year at the 6 month mark, I'm just
Wow.
now starting. And
Yeah.
so my publisher said, hey, I got to have a title, plot, jacket copy of your plot. For your next book, what is it? And I had nothing. I mean, I literally just typed the end. And so I'd been doing a lot of research on Iraq at the time. There were some militias running around. I said, there's this group called the Islamic State in Iraq, and they're nobody's ever heard of them, but they're getting a lot of foreign fighters. They're not Arabs. They're from people from England, from Sweden, from the United States, are going over there and they're turning into terrorists. And I think that's a pretty big threat. If somebody had a blue passport, American passport, blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy got indoctrinated into Islamic State, he would be able to travel anywhere in Europe and blow anything up he wants to. And that's what I'm going to write about. And I told him, it's kind of low-hanging fruit. Sorry, I don't have a lot there. Well, halfway through writing that book, Islamic State became ISIS, took over Mosul, took over most of Iraq, took over 40% of Syria. We're lopping heads off, burning people at the stake, burning a Jordanian pilot. Now everybody had heard about him. And, I looked like a genius, but it's not
Yeah.
because, I didn't predict that. They'd been running around since I was in Iraq. They just then became something, much bigger. And so that, I looked prescient. It's like, wow, Brad really knows how this is going on. I actually was afraid at the time. I was like, oh my God, we're going to wipe them out. The book's ruined. You know?
Yeah, interesting. Wow. So what about AI? I'm going off script a little bit here, but deepfake is, I mean, it's getting better
Yeah.
and better. I mean, you start looking at things like Unreal Engine or Midjourney and what we can
Yeah.
do and how we can make, fake people look real. We can look scenarios look pretty real. Is that gonna play into any of your future writings, do you think? I mean, is Pike gonna have to do
Actually,
that?
well, like I say, I like to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah, yeah.
American Trader 2 books ago, that the entire book was about that. It's about the elections in Taiwan using deep fakes to sway the election and also artificial intelligence for the defense of Taiwan that the Russians were manipulating so they could convince the Taiwanese that something was happening that was not happening by using artificial intelligence.
Brad, and I think I've got that on my shelf, and I'm gonna have to go back and reread that. I mean, you're
Yeah.
2 years ahead of time. I mean, it's now becoming even more and more prevalent, right? I mean, it's in
Oh, yeah.
everybody's space today. So I think it's so, and that's where I asked, you seem to have this premonition of where things are going. Like you might be writing about it, but it's interesting how maybe 2 years later it really hits.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I think it's really getting artificial intelligence going to be more and more, well, it's obviously going to be more and more prevalent on the battlefield, but it's going to be more and more of a moral dilemma. There's an ethical component to artificial intelligence is when do you take the man out of the loop and let the artificial intelligence determine what a target is? And right now, people say that there's always a man in the loop. Nobody will ever shoot a missile. It'll be a man pushing the button for the missile to go off.
yeah,
But it's artificial intelligence that's telling the man that's a target. So, I mean, we've almost come to it already. So, if artificial intelligence runs around, does all its nodes, whatever it's been trained to do, and it says, okay, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, that's a duck, shoot it. And it may be a duck, it may not. And
yeah.
so we say still a person in the loop has control, but he's still getting all his feeds from AI. If AI says it's a duck, I guess I'll shoot it.
Interesting. Yeah, wow. Boy, the things that we're going to have to face here, even in the next decade. It reminds me of War Games, if you remember that 1984.
Yeah,
I think,
actually, that was
yeah,
a Prussian movie. It really was.
yeah, yeah, like War Games. I mean, it was, yeah, pretty amazing. So, Brad, where can people, so the book comes out tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? So this book comes out tomorrow, Dead Man's Hand, January 23rd. You can get it all over the place. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you? How do people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on almost all social media, and all of the handles are Brad Taylor Books. So Brad Taylor Books on Facebook. My website is bradtaylorbooks.com. And if they want to read an excerpt of any of the books I've written, including Dead Man's Hand, they're up there for free. Brad Taylor Books on Twitter, Brad Taylor Books on Instagram. So Brad Taylor Books is basically it. And you can get the book, as they say, anywhere fine books are sold.
No, I love it. I love it. Brad, always a joy to have you on the show. Thank you for investing your time. Thanks for writing great material. It's very good. And I highly recommend, I love it when Brad's publicist reaches out. I'm always like, yes, I'm a huge Brad Taylor fan. How you write it just captivates me, pulls me in. And I'm always learning something. So,
Well, I
Brad,
appreciate it.
appreciate it. Yeah, I totally appreciate it. Thanks again for being on the show.